It all started with one unexpected conversation. On an ordinary evening, my wife and I were relaxing together in the living room when she turned toward me with a smile that hinted she was about to say something unusual. There was a mix of excitement and hesitation in her expression, enough to make me curious before she even spoke. "What if we tried something completely outside our comfort zone?" she asked. I smiled. "Like what?" My first guess was a road trip, a new hobby, or maybe moving to another city. Never in a million years did I imagine what she had been thinking. She took a slow breath before finally saying, "I've always wondered what it would be like if you lived as a woman, not just for fun or for a costume party, but seriously, for an entire year." For a moment I couldn't say anything. "You mean, really?" I asked. She nodded confidently. "I'd help you with everything," she explained. "Your wardrobe, makeup, hairstyle, voice, body language, everything. I don't want it to be a joke. I want it to be a genuine experience." The room fell silent. My first reaction was disbelief. The idea seemed impossible to process. Yet as strange as it sounded, I wasn't offended or upset. Instead, I found myself wondering what such an experience would actually be like. Questions flooded my mind. How would I look? Would anyone recognize me? How would strangers react? Most importantly, what would I learn about myself? Seeing the uncertainty on my face, Emily gently squeezed my hand. "I've been thinking about this for months," she admitted. "It's not about changing who you are. It's about stepping into a completely different perspective and seeing what life feels like through another lens." That night our conversation stretched on for hours. She described every detail she had imagined. We'd build a new wardrobe together, learn beauty techniques, practice different hairstyles, and gradually create an entirely new presentation. But she insisted the experiment wasn't only about appearance. "It has to be more than clothes," she said. "It's about experiencing different expectations, different interactions, and maybe discovering parts of yourself you've never explored." Surprisingly, the more she explained, the less impossible it sounded. By midnight we were still talking. By 2 a.m. we were discussing practical details. By sunrise I was considering something I had never imagined before. Maybe I could actually do this. Emily eventually smiled and made me an offer. "Let's agree on 1 year," she said. "If you truly hate it, we'll stop. No pressure, no arguments. But if you decide to try, promise me you'll give it your full commitment." 1 year. 12 months. 365 days. The length of the challenge felt overwhelming. Part of me wanted to decline immediately. Another part felt strangely excited. Life had become predictable. Every day followed the same routines and expectations. This idea, as unusual as it was, represented something completely different. After sitting quietly for several minutes, I finally looked at her. "All right," I said. Her eyes widened. "Really?" I nodded. "I'll do it." She threw her arms around me with pure excitement, and in that instant our lives changed direction. The following days were filled with preparation. Emily approached the project with incredible enthusiasm. Lists covered the dining table, fashion magazines appeared throughout the house, and online shopping carts overflowed with clothing, shoes, cosmetics, and accessories. It quickly became obvious that this wasn't a spontaneous thought. She had imagined every stage long before mentioning it to me. Our first milestone was clothing. The first time I slipped into a dress, I barely recognized the reflection staring back at me. Everything felt unfamiliar, the fabric, the fit, even the way I moved. I stood silently in front of the mirror. Emily adjusted the outfit, stepped back, and smiled warmly. "You look wonderful." Normally I would have brushed off a compliment like that, but hearing it in that moment gave me an unexpected boost of confidence. Soon after came makeup. Until then, I had never appreciated how much skill was involved. Foundation, concealer, contour, mascara, eyeliner, brushes, powders, there seemed to be an endless collection of products, each serving a specific purpose. Patiently, Emily demonstrated every step, explaining techniques and encouraging me to practice. Little by little my reflection began to change. My features appeared softer. My eyes seemed more expressive. Each session taught me that makeup was less about hiding someone and more about carefully shaping an appearance. But Emily reminded me that appearance was only one piece of the puzzle. If we're doing this, she laughed, we're doing all of it. That meant learning posture, walking gracefully, choosing accessories, understanding subtle social cues, and carrying myself differently. High heels quickly became my greatest challenge. The first attempt lasted only a few seconds before I stumbled awkwardly across the living room. Emily laughed so hard she nearly fell off the couch herself. I laughed too. Every day brought small improvements. The movements that initially felt unnatural slowly became more comfortable. Confidence replaced hesitation. As weeks passed, something even more unexpected happened. People began interacting with me differently. Cashiers started conversations more often. Store employees offered assistance without being asked. Complete strangers complimented my appearance. Simple errands suddenly felt like entirely new experiences. One afternoon Emily and I were browsing clothing stores together. As I walked toward the fitting rooms carrying several outfits, I caught sight of myself in a large mirror. I stopped. The person reflected back looked relaxed, fashionable, and surprisingly comfortable. For the first time, I wasn't focusing on what had changed. Instead, I noticed how natural everything had begun to feel. That realization caught me completely off guard. Of course, not every day was easy. There were mornings when doubt crept in. I'd wonder whether I had made the right decision or whether I was taking the experiment too far. Those moments usually appeared without warning. Whenever they did, Emily never criticized or pressured me. Instead, she reminded me why we'd started. This was never about pretending, she would say. It was about learning. Her support became the foundation that kept me moving forward. What had begun as one surprising question had evolved into an unforgettable journey of personal growth, unexpected friendships, new perspectives, and discoveries I never imagined possible. And somewhere along the way, I realized the biggest transformation wasn't happening in the mirror. It was happening within me. Emily often reminded me of something that gradually became the heart of the entire experience. This isn't about pretending to be someone you're not, she would tell me. It's about uncovering sides of yourself you've never had the chance to understand. At first, I thought those words were simply meant to reassure me. But as the months passed, I realized how true they were. The journey had very little to do with clothing or appearance anymore. Those things had become routine. The real changes were happening beneath the surface. I was becoming more patient while learning unfamiliar skills. I was developing a deeper appreciation for experiences that had once been invisible to me. Most importantly, I was learning to see life through a perspective I had never considered before. The challenge had become a lesson in empathy, confidence, and personal growth. Whenever uncertainty crept back into my mind, Emily never allowed me to face it alone. She constantly reminded me that this wasn't my challenge, it belonged to both of us. Every obstacle we encountered became something we worked through together. Her encouragement made even the most difficult days feel manageable. Before I realized it, 6 months had passed. Looking back, I could hardly recognize the nervous person who had reluctantly agreed to the experiment. What had started as an unusual promise had slowly transformed into everyday life. The routines that once felt awkward now came naturally. Applying makeup no longer required careful instruction. Choosing outfits became surprisingly simple. Styling my hair turned into just another part of my morning. Even wearing heels, something that had once seemed nearly impossible, had become effortless after months of practice. One evening after dinner, Emily and I settled onto the couch, enjoying a quiet night together. She studied me for a moment before smiling. "You've really changed," she said. I laughed. "I guess I have." She shook her head. "No," she replied gently. "I don't mean how you look. I mean how comfortable you've become." Her observation caught me by surprise because she was right. The greatest transformation wasn't visible in the mirror. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped thinking about the experience as fulfilling Emily's dream. Instead, it had become part of my own journey. I found myself paying more attention to how I communicated with others. I noticed emotions more easily. I became increasingly aware that every person carries experiences and expectations that often go unseen. Those lessons reached far beyond the experiment itself. Then Emily introduced another idea. One evening she looked at me with the same mysterious smile that had started everything months before. "I think you're ready for the next step." Immediately, I felt nervous. "What kind of step?" She grinned. "A real date." I stared at her. "You mean, out in public?" She nodded. "A proper dinner. Just the two of us." The thought made my stomach tighten. Running errands had become familiar enough, but spending an entire evening in a restaurant surrounded by strangers felt completely different. It seemed far more personal. Far more intimidating. Yet, despite my fears, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Over the following days, I imagined every possible scenario. Would people stare? Would anyone recognize me? Would I feel out of place? Eventually, curiosity won. I agreed. Emily chose a cozy restaurant with a quiet atmosphere, hoping it would make the experience less overwhelming. On the day of our reservation, I spent far longer getting ready than I ever expected. Every detail suddenly mattered. My outfit. My hairstyle. My accessories. Even deciding which shoes to wear felt strangely important. By the time we left the house, my heart was pounding. The drive seemed unusually long. As we pulled into the parking lot, I briefly considered asking Emily to cancel everything. Before I could speak, she reached over and gently held my hand. "You've got this," she whispered. Those simple words settled my nerves more than she probably realized. Walking through the restaurant doors felt like stepping into the spotlight. I expected curious looks. I expected awkward silence. Instead, nothing happened. The hostess greeted us with a friendly smile. Families continued enjoying their meals. Servers hurried between tables. Conversations carried on uninterrupted. No one appeared interested in examining me. To everyone else, I was simply another guest having dinner. That realization lifted an enormous weight from my shoulders. For months I had imagined being the center of attention. Instead, I discovered that most people were simply focused on their own evenings. As my anxiety faded, I relaxed. Dinner became enjoyable. Emily and I laughed more than we had in weeks. We reminisced about everything we had experienced together and joked about my early attempts to walk in heels. At one point I looked across the table and realized our relationship had grown stronger than ever before. The trust between us had deepened through every challenge, every awkward moment, and every success. What began as an unusual experiment had strengthened the bond we already shared. By the time we returned home that evening, I understood something important. The journey was no longer about proving whether I could complete the challenge. It had become about appreciating everything it had taught me. As the final months approached, I found myself reflecting more often. The finish line was finally within sight. Part of me looked forward to returning to familiar routines. Maintaining the transformation required constant effort, and there were days when it felt exhausting. Yet another part of me felt unexpectedly emotional. This experience had become woven into my daily life. It had changed the way I viewed myself and the world around me. Eventually, the final day arrived. Emily and I found ourselves sitting in the same living room where everything had begun nearly a year earlier. The atmosphere was completely different. Back then I had been uncertain, confused, and hesitant. Now I felt calm, grateful, at peace. Emily smiled warmly. "So," she asked, "after everything, how do you feel?" I paused for a long moment. Finding the right words wasn't easy. A single sentence couldn't possibly capture everything the past year had meant. Finally, I smiled. "I've changed." She waited quietly. "For the better." That simple answer carried far more meaning than I could explain. The experience had taught me perseverance by pushing me through unfamiliar situations. It had taught me compassion by allowing me to see life from a different perspective. It had given me confidence by encouraging me to confront fears instead of avoiding them. Most importantly, it reminded me that real personal growth rarely happens inside the boundaries of comfort. The person sitting beside Emily at the end of the year was not the same person who had nervously accepted her proposal months earlier. The journey had reshaped my understanding of identity, resilience, and self-discovery. Although I was ready to return to the life I had known before, I knew many of those lessons would remain with me forever. What began as one unexpected question had evolved into a remarkable year filled with learning, trust, and transformation. In the end, Emily and I reached the same conclusion. The greatest change had never been about appearances. It was about gaining a deeper understanding of ourselves, strengthening our relationship, and discovering that the most meaningful transformations often happen where no mirror can reflect them.